The clone troopers of the Grand Army of the Republic were some of the most effective soldiers in the history of the Star Wars universe, prepared from birth for the battlefields of the Clone Wars. They were expert soldiers, possessing far more skill, ingenuity, and resilience than their droid opponents. But the success of the Grand Army of the Republic wasn't solely due to the clones' inherent traits. Clone troopers had access to a top-tier arsenal of weapons and equipment which contributed significantly to their success. In this video, we'll be giving you a comprehensive overview of the basic clone trooper kit. Experience a whole new world of Star Wars collecting with Star Wars Card Trader by Topps. This awesome app allows you to uniquely experience Star Wars by opening digital packs of your favorite Star Wars characters, weapons, and spacecraft, and then connecting and trading with fellow fans across the galaxy to complete sets and missions. To top it off, you can steadily grow your collection day in and day out by receiving regular free cards and credits. Some of my personal favorite cards in my collection at the moment, even though they're only tier 1, are Omega and the twins from the Book of Boba Fett. This is purely because I love both the shows that the characters feature in. To further add to the fun, you can get free cards and collectibles through the lock-on feature. So make sure you join me on Star Wars Card Trader by Topps by adding my username Geetsly and downloading the app in the description below. Most of the clone kit was designed before there were any clones mature enough to actually use it. During the development of the first generation of clones, the Kaminoan clone masters contracted various companies for the production of weapons, armor, and other equipment for their rapidly maturing army. The clones' iconic armor was designed in-house by the Kaminoan armorsmiths, while the production of blasters and other weapons was contracted to Blastech Industries and Merson Munitions. Much of the clone kit was based on the standard equipment used by Mandalorian shock troopers. This was mostly out of convenience, since Jango Fett knew a fair bit about Mandalorian equipment and lived in Topoka City, and also because the Kaminoans found it fitting that clones made of a Mandalorian wear Mandalorian-esque armor. Though most of the clones' equipment wasn't nearly Mandalorian tier, especially their armor, the stylistic influence was pretty evident. When the clone army was fully deployed, the Kaminoans' carefully crafted arsenal proved to be a major advantage for Republic forces. Many Jedi generals donned pieces of clone armor, and a few Jedi even used GAR-issued DC-15S blaster carbines during some of the war's fiercest battles. However, the original clone kit wasn't perfect. Midway through the war, the Kaminoans rolled out new and improved Phase 2 armor, which came in a number of new specialty configurations and came with some better equipment too. Speaking of clone armor, that's as good a place as any to start our overview. Clone armor was worn over a padded black body glove, which was pressurized and insulated to keep clones safe and comfortable across a wide range of temperatures and environments. Over this body glove, the clones wore 40 kilograms or 88 pounds in freedom units of plastoid armor, which came in 20 plates attached to the glove via magnetomic grip panels. To most beings, this armor appeared to be a bright white, though to the Kaminoans, who could see in the ultraviolet spectrum, it was painted in a broad array of colors. Half of those armor plates, the shoulder bells, rear braces, elbow plates, van braces, and gauntlet plates, were worn on the arms. 8 more were worn on the legs, the thigh plates, knee plates, greaves, and boots. The rest of a clone trooper's body was encased in just 2 plates, a cuirass and codpiece. Clones also wore placards over their abdomens, but it's unknown whether this was just an extension of the codpiece or a separate piece that wasn't counted as an armor plate. We lean toward the latter since it seems to have been far more flexible than anything made of plastoid should be. Most of the Phase 1 armor suit was just armor, but a few plates had some fancy features built into them. The clones' boots could maintain a grip on practically any surface and were capable of magnetizing to metal surfaces, a handy little trick for space battles. The armor's right vambrace featured a built-in comlink which connected to the helmet's internal communication system, which we'll talk about shortly. Finally, the back of the cuirass featured surprisingly comprehensive climate control systems which could regulate the internal temperature of the armor and vacuum seal it for brief periods. Clone armor came with 2 additional pieces of equipment, a utility belt and a helmet. We'll discuss the contents of the utility belt later, but the helmet is worth a particularly close look. The helmet was the most important part of the entire clone kit. Apart from providing protection for the clone's head, these helmets came with a ton of special features. The most important of these were the comlink built into the chin piece, the receivers built above the ears, and the comlink's transmitter, which was built into the helmet's distinctive fin. Together, these allowed clones to maintain contact with each other, their commanders, and any nearby LAAT gunships. The helmet's communication systems were soundproof, allowing clones to tune out most of the din of battle and prevent their conversations from being heard by anyone outside of their squad. Clone helmets also featured distinctive T-shaped visors, which allowed clones to see through fog and in the dark, and generated comprehensive heads-up displays that could identify targets and friendlies, giving clones crucial advantages during battle. The HUDs on clone helmets actually interfaced with clones' blast rifles, calculating firing solutions for the clones in the heat of combat. This led many clones to joke that they were only lever arms, existing only because their helmets were incapable of pulling the trigger. Phase 2 armor had pretty much all the same features as Phase 1 armor, and to many outsiders, they looked virtually indistinguishable aside from the helmets. However, there were actually a great many differences between the two armor sets. As we mentioned earlier, Phase 1 armor was pretty heavy and it was uncomfortable as well, leading to many clones calling it the body bucket. Phase 1 armor was especially unpleasant for clone pilots who found that the armor's codpiece and thigh plates were, all too literally, a real pain in the ass. Phase 2 armor didn't just upgrade clones' helmets. Every single plate of the armor was redesigned to be lighter and more comfortable. This did come at a cost though. While Phase 1 armor was very resilient, with the cuirass able to tank a blaster bolt or two, Phase 2 armor was slightly less protective. However, the added maneuverability meant the upgrade provided was worth it to most of the clones. Clone armor, and Stormtrooper armor for that matter, gets a lot of flack for supposedly not granting its wearers much protection. However, as we've discussed in previous videos, it was a lot more useful in battle than it looked. While the armor couldn't stand up to direct hits from anything stronger than a holdout blaster, it protected clones from glancing shots, shrapnel, heat, cold, poison gas, acid, and similar toxins, and to an extent, fall damage. The helmet also prevented clones from being blinded by bright flashes. This eliminated most secondary battlefield dangers, leaving clones with only enemy fire to worry about. Protection against shrapnel, in particular, was crucial. Apart from their armor, clones made use of several models of blaster and a whole slew of other equipment. Their utility belts came with pouches for spare ammunition, a grappling hook, ration supplies, and even a small medical kit with synth flesh and Bacta. Most clones also carried multi-tools, sanitary wipes, and other handy gadgets, though this wasn't part of the standard loadout. The belt featured a built-in tracker and a small cylindrical thermal detonator, which was meant to be used as a last resort. When needed, clones also made use of simple armored GAR issue backpacks, which could carry ammunition, additional medical supplies, or grenades. As far as grenades went, clones typically favored V1 thermal detonators, LXR-6 concussion grenades, V6 haywire grenades, and several models of EMP grenades, which were known affectionately as droid poppers. For extended missions, clones usually brought along 2 thermal detonators, 2 concussion grenades, and a droid popper. In battle, clones also relied on additional equipment that was carried aboard ATTEs and LAAT gunships. In particular, this included IM-6 battlefield medical droids. Virtually every vehicle in the Grand Army carried an IM-6, and they were common sights on the battlefields of the Clone Wars, zipping through the fray on their repulsor lifts to help wounded clones. The IM-6 was small, but it was strong enough to drag wounded clones to safety, and these little droids saved a great many lives. Of course, any soldier's most valuable tool is their weapon. Clones had 3 to pick from: the DC-15A blaster rifle, the DC-15S blaster carbine, and the DC-17 blaster pistol. All of these blasters were extremely powerful, far outclassing the blasters used by the Separatists. Since the Separatists primarily fielded battle droids, the blaster gas used by clones was ionized, which gave the blaster bolts a blue tinge. At the start of the Clone Wars, the DC-15A was the weapon of choice for most clones, and for good reason. These large, bulky blaster rifles were insanely powerful, capable of punching holes through ferrocrete walls and accurate fire at a range of 10 kilometers when tripod mounted. However, the DC-15A was large and heavy, making it impractical in situations where mobility was key. As a result, many clones preferred the DC-15S. As a blaster carbine, the DC-15S was nearly as powerful as the DC-15A, though it had a far shorter effective range. Both blasters had stun settings and non-lethal special features. The DC-15A came with a hardpoint for grappling hook attachments, while the DC-15S came with a collapsible stock. A few clones made use of other blasters, most notably the DC-17 blaster pistol. The DC-17 was tiny when compared to the DC-15S, but it was actually more powerful than its carbine cousin. This came at the cost of a far smaller magazine capacity. Some clones with specialized training used other weapons, but since this video is about the standard clone loadout, we won't be covering them today. If you're interested to learn about other clone weapons, we've made a full video on them in the past. Well, that about wraps up our look at the standard clone kit, but what do you think? Are there other Star Wars soldiers you'd like us to analyze? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comments section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.